November 20th, 1973, Langley, Virginia. CIA Director Richard Helms stood in his office about to give the order to destroy thousands of classified documents. The MK Ultra files had to be burned because if the public found out, the government could collapse. Helms's hand trembled as he held the phone. The urgent call he'd received that afternoon could destroy his career and possibly his country. His secretary, Margaret Stevens, entered the room and noticed the fear in Helms's eyes. "Sir, Senator Church's office called. The committee wants full access to CIA files first thing tomorrow morning." The massive metal filing cabinet across from him contained one of America's darkest secrets. Inside those documents were detailed accounts of horrific experiments the CIA had conducted on its own citizens for the past 20 years. Mind control, memory erasure, LSD experiments, psychological torture. If these files reached the public, not only the CIA, but the entire American government could crumble. Helms took a deep breath and pulled out a folder with shaking hands. Project MK Ultra, Top Secret, was printed on the cover. The first page contained handwritten notes by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. Subject number 127, LSD dosage 200 micrograms. Continuous hallucinations began, complete memory loss achieved. "Margaret," Helms said in a cold voice, "call the security chief. We're going to burn everything, leave no trace." Stevens asked in bewilderment, "Which documents, sir?" "All of them," Helms repeated. "MK Ultra, Artichoke, Blue Bird, everything." And Margaret, this conversation never happened. But there was something Helms didn't know. In the CIA's finance department, accountant Dorothy Matthews was examining suspicious expense records at that very moment. These records would survive the burning. Soon, America's most horrific secret would come to light. This story isn't science fiction. This really happened. And today, I'm going to share all the dark details of those experiments with you. August 15th, 1945. Washington, D.C. Harry S. Truman sat in the Oval Office reading reports about the atomic bomb. World War II was ending, but a new and far more dangerous war was about to begin. Reports from the Pentagon were terrifying. American pilots captured during the Korean War were displaying strange behaviors. Major William Thompson from North Carolina returned after 6 months of captivity in a state his family couldn't recognize. Thompson had previously been known for his fierce anti-communist views, but now he was praising Stalin and calling America an imperialist monster. Most shocking of all, he seemed to genuinely believe what he was saying. Brainwashing. The term was first used during this period. CIA Director Allen Dulles organized a special meeting with the Pentagon to solve this problem. The meeting on February 15, 1950 would make decisions that would shape America's future. In the meeting room, beside Dulles sat Defense Secretary Lewis Johnson, NSA Director Walter Bedell Smith, and several high-ranking officers. On the table were transcripts of statements given by captured pilots. Each one said remarkably similar things, as if they had memorized the same script. "Gentlemen," said Dulles, adjusting his glasses, "how did the Chinese manage to turn our men into this state? And more importantly, how can we learn this technique and use it ourselves?" Colonel Harrison Mitchell from the Pentagon stood up. He opened his file. "Sir, according to our intelligence, China and the Soviets are systematically applying psychological pressure to prisoners. Sleep deprivation, drug use, repetitive interrogations. But we don't know the exact techniques." Dulles nodded. "Then we'll learn, and we'll do it better." At the end of this meeting, a decision was made that would launch one of the darkest periods in American history. The CIA was given unlimited budget and authority to research ways to control the human mind. Bronx, New York, 1932. 14-year-old Sidney Gottlieb was conducting chemistry experiments in the small room behind his family's shop. The son of Russian immigrants, Gottlieb had discovered his passion for science at an early age, but he also possessed a darkness that set him apart from normal children. Robert Herman, Gottlieb's high school friend, would later recall, "Sidney was always different. He used mice in his chemistry experiments, but when the mice died, he never seemed upset. He looked at them as if they were just materials." In 1943, Gottlieb graduated with a doctorate in chemistry from the California Institute of Technology. Instead of a normal academic career, he chose a much more secretive path, the CIA. When he joined the CIA's Technical Services Division in 1951, he was only 33 years old and possessed very special talents. In his CIA personnel file, these notes appeared about Gottlieb: high IQ level, expert in chemistry, minimal ethical concern. This last trait made him the perfect candidate for MK Ultra. On April 3, 1953, a historic meeting took place in the CIA's Langley headquarters conference room. Director Alan Dulles sat at his desk, watching Dr. Gottlieb and other high-ranking officials across from him. Through the window, Virginia's green hills were visible, but the atmosphere in the room was ice cold. Dulles placed a thick file on his desk. "Mr. Gottlieb, this file contains what we know about Soviet mind control techniques. It's very little. What I want from you is simple: surpass them in this field." Gottlieb opened the file and read the first page. It contained mediocre information about how the Soviets had turned prisoners so quickly. "Sir, what kind of resources will we have?" "Unlimited," Dulles said firmly. "Money, personnel, facilities, whatever is needed. But we have one condition: you must leave no trace. This project will not exist in official records." A gleam appeared in Gottlieb's eyes. "Understood, sir. Human testing?" "Whatever you deem necessary," Dulles replied. "But be careful. Harm to American citizens could create political problems." After this meeting, Gottlieb assembled a small team. Dr. Harold Abramson, Dr. Harris Isbell, Dr. Carl Pfeiffer, all experts in their fields, all flexible on ethical issues. The MK Ultra program had officially begun. The program was named MK Ultra. The MK code referred to the CIA's mind control projects. Ultra was inspired by the Ultra code-breaking project from World War II. The irony was that this time, the code to be broken was the human mind. Albany, New York, 1958. The New York State Psychiatric Institute appeared to be a normal mental health center from the outside, but Dr. Harold Abramson's special section was being used for very different purposes. Secret funds from the CIA had turned this place into a kind of human laboratory. Margaret Thompson, a 34-year-old English teacher, walked through the clinic doors on March 15, 1958, hoping only to deal with the depression she was experiencing after her husband's death. Her husband, Robert, a Vietnam veteran, had died of a heart attack 2 months after returning from the war. Margaret couldn't get over this loss. When Dr. Abramson received Margaret in his office, he immediately faxed the woman's file to CIA Coordinator Dr. James Mitchell. Mitchell's response came immediately. "Suitable profile. Include in test group." "Mrs. Thompson," Abramson said in a gentle voice, "I want to offer you a very special treatment. We have a newly developed experimental drug. I think it will be very effective for your depression." Margaret asked hopefully, "What kind of drug, doctor?" "A substance called LSD 25. It will open your mind and help you process your trauma. Of course, the process may take a while. You'll need to stay in the clinic for a few weeks." Margaret approached this offer with suspicion. "Are there side effects?" Dr. Abramson smiled. "Minimal. Some dizziness, mild nausea. Normal drug reactions. Don't worry, you'll be under constant supervision." Margaret didn't know that Dr. Abramson wasn't telling her the complete truth. LSD 25 was a powerful psychedelic substance found only in a few laboratories worldwide at that time, with effects that weren't fully understood. And Margaret had been chosen to test this substance's effects on humans. The first LSD injection was given to Margaret on March 20th. Dr. Abramson, with 2 nurses and a security guard present, inserted the needle into Margaret's arm. 100 micrograms LSD 25, subject M47, he murmured into the recording device. The first 30 minutes passed normally. Margaret felt slight dizziness, that was all. But after the 45th minute, her world completely changed. The flower pattern on the wall began to move. Colors were flowing. Neon shapes were dancing in the air. Margaret started screaming, "What are you doing to me? The walls are moving." Nurse Janet Adams replied calmly, "This is the normal effect of the medication, Mrs. Thompson. It would be better if you didn't panic." But Margaret was in panic. The distinction between reality and fantasy had disappeared. Dr. Abramson was noting Margaret's reactions minute by minute. 4:30 p.m., visual hallucinations began. 4:45 p.m., temporal disorientation. 5 p.m., extreme anxiety response. Excellent. Margaret's treatment process lasted 3 months. During this time, she was injected with LSD 3 times a week. Sometimes the dose was raised to 200, sometimes 300 micrograms. Dr. Abramson was comparing the effects of different doses. One of the most traumatic experiences occurred after Margaret was given 400 micrograms of LSD. Margaret experienced continuous hallucinations for 12 hours. She saw herself being chased by giant insects. Faces appeared on the walls cursing at her. Margaret wet herself that night, but even this was noted by the nurses. Physiological control loss observed. When Margaret left the Albany clinic after 3 months, she was no longer the same Margaret. She constantly saw hallucinations, couldn't distinguish between reality and dreams. Her teaching career was over. This was exactly Dr. Abramson's purpose, to learn what kind of permanent damage LSD could cause to the human mind. And Margaret was just the beginning. At the Albany Clinic, 127 other patients shared the same fate. Basel, Switzerland, April 19, 1943. Chemist Dr. Albert Hoffman was working in the silence of the Sandoz laboratory. That day, a small chemical drop that accidentally touched his finger would change the course of history. As Hoffman rode his bicycle home, he began to feel strange things. Colors appeared brighter. Objects seemed to be moving. It was as if I was living in another world, he would write in his diary. This event would go down in science history as Bicycle Day. The substance Hoffman discovered was LSD 25. Lysergic acid diethylamide. Even a minimal dose of 25 micrograms could completely change a person's perceptual world. The CIA discovered LSD's potential in 1951. Dr. Gottlieb was excited when he read the first reports. This substance could revolutionize interrogation. When a person loses the distinction between reality and fantasy, they might tell everything. Gottlieb made a secret agreement with the Swiss firm Sandoz to obtain LSD. This agreement was one of the largest drug purchases in CIA history. Between 1951 to 1967, the CIA bought 90% of the world's LSD production. The first LSD experiments were conducted on the CIA's own personnel. Gottlieb wanted to test agents' resistance to LSD. But these experiments produced horrific results. Frederick, Maryland, Fort Detrick. Dr. Frank Olson was one of the most important scientists in America's biological weapons program. He had studied microbiology at Princeton and worked with anthrax and other biological agents during the war. In 1953, he was assigned as a consultant to the MK Ultra program. But as Olson learned more about the program, he began to feel uncomfortable. As he visited CIA stations in Europe, He saw how brutal the interrogation techniques were. What he saw at the CIA safe house in Frankfurt particularly affected him deeply. Alice, Olson's wife, had noticed changes in her husband's behavior. Frank wasn't the same, she would recount years later. He couldn't sleep at night. He had nightmares. He constantly said, "I need to quit this job." November 18th, 1953, Deep Creek Lodge, Maryland. A departmental meeting was being held at the CIA's secret facility. Frank Olson was among the invitees. Meeting attendees included Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, CIA Technical Services Director Richard Lashbrook, and 6 high-ranking CIA officials. On the second evening of the meeting, after dinner, Dr. Gottlieb stood up. He had a bottle of cognac in his hand. "Gentlemen, I want to offer you a special drink, a vintage cognac I brought from France." Gottlieb filled everyone's glasses. All 8 people, including Frank Olson, drank their cognac. But 20 minutes later, Gottlieb dropped the bombshell. "By the way, gentlemen, I had mixed LSD into the cognac you just drank. A small experiment." Olson jumped up in horror. "Do you realize what you've done, Sidney? You know the effects of this substance." "Calm down, Frank," Gottlieb said coolly. "Only 160 micrograms, not lethal." But for Olson, that night, nightmare-filled hours were beginning. Under the influence of LSD, he saw spiders on the ceiling. Faces appeared on the walls. But what was truly terrifying was what he experienced after the substance's effects wore off. The next morning, Olson called his wifey Alice. His voice was trembling. "Alice, something terrible happened. The CIA gave me LSD. I'm going to reveal everything about this program. I'm going to resign." This phone call was Frank Olson's death warrant. San Francisco, California, 1955. The Victorian-style house on Telegraph Hill looked like a normal residence from the outside, but inside, one of the strangest experiments in American history was being conducted. Operation Midnight Climax was one of MK Ultra's most bizarre subprojects. The CIA had rented 4 different houses in San Francisco and converted them into secret laboratories. The plan was simple: give LSD to unsuspecting civilians and observe their reactions. George Hunter White was the CIA agent running the operation. An experienced agent from the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, White had a special talent: deceiving people. "How are we going to fill these houses?" Gottlieb had asked during the operation briefing. White had smiled cunningly. "The easiest way. We'll make these houses look like brothels. Men will come for entertainment and we'll test them." White's plan was perfect. He hired call girls and convinced them to work as hostesses. Male customers thought they were just coming for fun, but were actually becoming CIA test subjects. The Telegraph Hill house's living room was specially designed. One-way mirrors, hidden cameras, recording devices. Everything was camouflaged so customers wouldn't suspect anything. Harold Thompson was a 35-year-old real estate agent who had come to San Francisco from Los Angeles on a business trip. His friend Jerry Sullivan had recommended the special house on Telegraph Hill. "There are great girls there. You'll have a lot of fun," he had said. When Thompson arrived at the house on June 3rd, 1958, a beautiful woman greeted him. "Hello, I'm Linda. I'm your hostess tonight." Linda's real name was Patricia Foster, and she was on the CIA payroll. Linda offered Thompson whiskey. What he didn't know was that the whiskey contained 200 micrograms of LSD. CIA agents were watching and recording everything from behind the one-way mirror. After 30 minutes, Thompson's world began to change. Walls were rippling. Colors appeared extremely bright. "This whiskey is very strong," he told Linda. "Is this your first time drinking?" Linda asked, speaking as if into a microphone. CIA agents had prepared this question in advance. Thompson tried to escape from the house in paranoia. He ran to the door, but had trouble finding his way under the influence of LSD. Linda tried to calm him. "Hey, where are you going? The night is just beginning." But Thompson was in panic. He started running through San Francisco streets. CIA agents secretly followed him. Thompson was shouting to random people on Market Street, "Someone poisoned me! Help!" When police found Thompson, he was still under the influence of LSD. He was taken to the hospital and diagnosed with acute psychoactive intoxication, but no one understood that he had been deliberately given drugs. When Thompson returned to Los Angeles, his life was shattered. His wife Mary didn't believe him. "It's obvious what you did in San Francisco. Don't lie to me." The marriage ended in divorce. He was also fired from his job. His boss, Frank Miller: "Harold, you've been acting very strange lately. Our clients are complaining. This can't continue." Thompson died of a heart attack in 1967 at only 42 years old. His doctor diagnosed cardiac arrest caused by stress, but the real cause was psychological trauma that lasted 10 years. George White's diary entries about that night were horrific. Subject H23 exceeded our expectations. Extreme paranoid reaction, very promising for LSD use in interrogation. We need more test subjects. The CIA didn't limit itself to its own facilities. It also drew America's most prestigious universities into the MK Ultra network: Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Princeton. The psychiatry and psychology departments of these institutions were funded by secret CIA money. Harvard University, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Dr. Henry Murray headed the psychiatry department and was also one of the CIA's consultants. Between 1959 to 1962, he conducted psychological experiments on students under the name personality development. Among the victims of these experiments was 17-year-old mathematics student Theodore Kaczynski. Kaczynski was a genius-level intellect but socially isolated young man. He participated in Murray's personality assessment experiment as an academic study. Murray's real purpose was different: to learn how to break and reshape young minds. Kaczynski was a perfect test case. The experiment worked like this. Kaczynski was asked to write a detailed essay about his ideals and future plans. Then he was told he would defend this essay in an academic debate setting. But the debate partner he faced was actually Dr. William Denny, a psychological warfare expert trained by the CIA. Denny's job was to systematically destroy everything Kaczynski had written. The first session took place on October 15, 1959, in Harvard Psychology Lab. When Kaczynski entered the room with his essay, he was confident. After all, he had written about his dreams of a brilliant career in mathematics. Dr. Denny ridiculed every sentence Kaczynski wrote. "Mathematics? Do you really think people will be interested in your stupid number games? How naive." Kaczynski was surprised, but tried to respond. "Mathematics is the fundamental language of the universe." "Nonsense!" Denny shouted. "You're just a pathological antisocial trying to hide your social inadequacy behind numbers." These verbal attacks continued for 2 hours. Meanwhile, Kaczynski's pulse, blood pressure, and brain waves were being measured. Every reaction was recorded. The sessions continued for weeks. Each time, Kaczynski withdrew more into himself. Murray's notes contained these statements. Subject K, showing signs of increasing isolation. Perfect breakdown of ego structure. This experience deeply affected Kaczynski. After graduating from Harvard, he withdrew to the remote areas of Montana. He wrote an anti-technology manifesto, and between 1978 and 1995, carried out mail bombing attacks known as the Unabomber. He killed 3 people and wounded 23. When the FBI caught Kaczynski, they found newspaper clippings about MK Ultra in his Montana cabin. His lawyers argued that the Harvard experiments had affected him, but the court didn't accept this defense. At Stanford University, Palo Alto, California, another experiment was taking place. Dr. Leo Hollister was conducting psychopharmacology research at the medical school. He was actually consulting for the CIA, conducting LSD tests on young medical students for MK Ultra. James Rodriguez was a 22-year-old medical student. He had a bright future. His childhood dream was to become a pediatrician. When he saw Dr. Hollister's volunteer medical research advertisement, he thought he would both contribute to science and earn $50. "This is just a new antidepressant," Dr. Hollister said while giving Rodriguez the injection. "It has very mild side effects, some dizziness, that's all." The antidepressant given to Rodriguez was actually 300 micrograms of LSD. After 45 minutes, Rodriguez's world collapsed. The lights in the operating room were moving like living animals. Monster faces were appearing on the walls. "Doctor!" Rodriguez shouted. "Something's going wrong." Hollister calmly recorded, "Subject experiencing intense visual hallucinations. Excellent response to LSD 25. Rodriguez's nightmare lasted 8 hours, but the real problem started later. Weeks of depression, panic attacks, distortions in reality perception. Rodriguez couldn't complete his medical education. "That experiment ruined my life," he would say years later. "I sold my future for $50, but the real guilt wasn't mine. It was the doctors who deceived me." New York City, November 28, 1953, 2:30 a.m. A scream was heard from the 13th floor of the Statler Hotel. Dr. Frank Olson had fallen from his room window. That night, CIA security officer Richard Lashbrook was also in the room. Lashbrook's statement to police was, "Doctor, Olson has been very depressed lately. He showed suicidal tendencies after the LSD experience. I was sleeping. I woke up to the sound of breaking glass." But the truth was much darker. After the LSD experience at Deep Creek Lodge, Frank Olson had changed. What he told his wife Alice on the phone had panicked the CIA. "Alice, I'm going to reveal everything about this program. I'm going to inform the public." Dr. Gottlieb called an emergency meeting on November 25, 1953, at CIA Langley headquarters. What to do about Olson was discussed. "Frank knows too much," Gottlieb said. "MK Ultra, biological weapons program, overseas operations. If he talks, we're all finished." CIA Director Alan Dulles replied coldly, "Then make sure he doesn't talk." Richard Lashbrook was given a special mission: take Olson to New York for treatment. The real purpose was different. On November 27th, Olson called his wife Alice for the last time. "Alice, I'm going to New York to get psychiatric help. I love you and the children very much." Alice would never forget the tone of fear in her husband's voice. Frank's voice was trembling. It was as if he was saying goodbye. That night at the Statler Hotel, Lashbrook and Olson were staying in the same room. According to CIA records, Olson had been given a strong sedative and put to sleep. But Dr. James Starr's forensic examination in 1994 told a different story. Olson's skull had severe trauma marks that occurred before the fall. This showed that Olson had been struck on the head before falling. Starr's report was clear. Frank Olson didn't commit suicide. He was a homicide victim. The CIA had deceived the Olson family for 22 years. In 1975, when MK Ultra documents were revealed, the truth came out. The CIA paid the Olson family $750,000 in compensation and apologized, but it continued to hide important details. Frank Olson had become the first murder victim of the MK Ultra program, but he wasn't the only one. Lexington, Kentucky. The Addiction Research Center looked like a normal treatment center from the outside, but this facility run by Dr. Harris Isbell, was where MK Ultra's most horrific experiments took place. Isbell received special funding from the CIA to conduct LSD tests on drug addicts. His victims were mostly African American drug addicts. These people couldn't make their voices heard in the system. Eddie Williams was a 28-year-old heroin addict. He had come from Louisville to Lexington for treatment. Dr. Isbell offered him a new detox program. "This medicine will free you from drug," Isbell said while giving Williams the injection. "You might feel a bit strange, but it's temporary." The treatment given to Williams was actually 1,000 micrograms of LSD daily. 100 micrograms is enough for a normal trip. Williams was being given 10 times more. This treatment lasted 77 days. Williams was under continuous LSD influence for the last 11 weeks of his life. Dr. Isbell's notes contained Subject W showing severe psychological breakdown. Excellent data for extended LSD exposure research. Williams never returned to normal after this experiment. Constant hallucinations, severe paranoia, inability to participate in complex human interactions. He died in 1967 at only 33 years old from an accidental overdose. More than 800 people like Williams became victims of LSD experiments in Lexington. Most were African American, all from society's most vulnerable segments. 1974, Washington, D.C. After the Watergate scandal shook America, Congress put federal agencies under close scrutiny. Senator Frank Church, an idealistic Democrat from Idaho, formed the Church Committee to investigate intelligence activities. Church had suspicions about CIA operations. The question, what kind of secret operations is the American government conducting against its own citizens, was troubling him. On January 15, 1975, the Church Committee first requested MK Ultra-related documents from the CIA. The CIA's response was surprising. "We have no knowledge of such a program," but Church insisted. Committee member Senator Walter Mondale wanted to deepen the investigation. "There are strange expenditures in the CIA's secret budget lines. We need to learn where this money is going." Accountant Dorothy Matthews, working in the CIA's finance department, was noticing anomalous expenditures at that time. A total of $25 million had been spent between 1951 and 1967 under the heading Special Research Projects. There was no documentation about these projects. Matthews conveyed her concerns to her supervisor, Finance Department Director Robert Johnson. Johnson was also suspicious. "Dorothy, not keeping any records about such large projects goes against CIA procedures. We might have to send these files to Congress." Richard Helms was panicking. He had forgotten about the existence of the Finance Department records. When he burned the MK Ultra files in 1973, these financial records had been overlooked. November 20th, 1973, CIA Langley headquarters. Richard Helms had called in a special security team early in the day. Operation Document Disposal had begun. In the basement of the CIA archives, huge incinerators started working. Every document related to MK Ultra was being systematically destroyed. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb was throwing files into the fire with his own hands. "No trace of our 20 years of work must remain," he murmured. Helms was personally supervising the burning operation. "Faster!" he shouted to security personnel. "Congress could come here at any moment." The burning operation lasted 72 hours. An estimated 150,000 documents were destroyed. Details of MK Ultra sub-projects, names and medical records of test subjects, LSD purchase agreements, secret contracts with universities, reports of experiments resulting in death. But there was a gap in Helms's plan. Financial records in the finance department were kept in a different system and had escaped the burning order. New York Times journalist John Marks had come across strange information while researching the CIA in 1976. Following a tip from one of his sources, he requested documents from the CIA under the Freedom of Information Act. In 1977, something unexpected happened. The CIA found 20,000 pages of MK-Ultra documents that had survived the burning. These documents were stored in a forgotten filing cabinet in finance. When Marks received the documents, he was shocked. The scale of experiments the CIA had conducted on its own citizens was incredible. MK-Ultra statistics: 149 different sub-projects, 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons, 44 university medical schools, 12 hospitals, 3 prisons, thousands of unsuspecting test subjects, at least 40 documented deaths, $25 million total expenditure. Horrific truths learned from these documents. MK Naomi. Assassination techniques with biological weapons. MKDELTA. Hypnosis and sleep research. ARTICHOKE. Drug-assisted interrogation techniques. BLUEBIRD. Memory erasure experiments. QKHILLTOP. Reverse engineering of Chinese brainwashing techniques. Margaret Thompson, victim of LSD experiments in Albany, began trembling when she read the New York Times report in 1977. After 19 years, she was learning why she had lost her memory. Thompson hired lawyer Joseph Rao, along with other victims. Rao sued the CIA in federal court. These people were innocent American citizens, Rao said in court. The CIA used them like lab rats. What was done is no different from Nazi experiments. CIA lawyers used these arguments in their defense. National security requirements. Extraordinary circumstances of the Cold War. Good faith. Scientific research. Statute of limitations. The court partially ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. The CIA was ordered to pay an average of $750,000 in compensation to each victim. But no CIA officials faced criminal prosecution. Harold Thompson's family also filed suit. Thompson was the businessman who was given LSD in San Francisco and died in 1967. His wife, Mary Thompson: "My husband was never the same after that LSD experiment. The CIA killed him." The court decided to award the Thompson family $950,000 in compensation. MK-Ultra officially ended in 1967, but mind control research didn't stop. The program continued under different names and in different forms. MK Search, 1965 to 1972. Continuation of MK-Ultra. Often Chickwit, 1968 to 1972. Occult and Paranormal Research, Third Chance, 1960s to 1970s. Behavior modification techniques. Today, mind control is no longer done with LSD. New tools are much more sophisticated. Social media manipulation. Facebook's 2014 emotion contagion experiment on 700,000 users. Micro-targeting, Cambridge Analytica scandal, neuromarketing, influencing consumer behavior with brain scanning, subliminal advertising, subconscious advertising. Dr. Jose Delgado was experimenting with behavior control by implanting electrodes in the brain in the late 1950s. Today, companies like Neuralink are developing similar technology. The Pentagon's DARPA division still conducts mind control research today. Narrative Networks Program. Behavior. Change through storytelling, neurotechnology, research, brain-machine interfaces, social media intelligence, platform manipulation. The CIA's Phoenix program used MK-Ultra techniques in interrogation during the Vietnam War. An estimated 40,000 people became victims of this program. Interrogation techniques at Guantanamo Bay draw inspiration from MK-Ultra research. sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, sexual humiliation. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, architect of MK Ultra, said this in his rare interview with the Washington Post before his death in 1999. I regret MK Ultra, but we thought differently then. There was the Cold War. The Soviets could have acted before us. We thought we were doing our best. I regret Frank Olson's death the most. He was a good man, but he knew too much and intended to talk. We had no other choice. Gottlieb also admitted MK Ultra's failure. Mind control isn't possible. People can't be turned into robots, but many people were harmed during this research. Eric Olson was only 9 years old when his father died. When he became an adult, he began research in the real cause of his father's death. In 2001, Eric arranged for his father's body to be exhumed again. Forensic experts definitively determined that the trauma marks on the skull had occurred before the fall. My father was murdered, Eric said in 2012. The CIA killed its own employee, and justice still hasn't been served. Eric Olson sued the CIA again in 2017. The case is still ongoing in courts. Dr. Cameron's Canadian experiments. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Dr. Ewan Cameron conducted psychic driving experiments. Patients were put into coma-like states for weeks while repetitive messages were played. Patient Linda McDonald lost all her memories, including how to walk and talk. The Pont Saint-Esprit incident. In 1951, an entire French village experienced mass LSD poisoning. CIA documents later revealed this was a covert test of aerosol LSD dispersal. 5 people died. Hundreds were hospitalized with severe psychosis. Prison experiments. At Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia, Dr. Albert Kligman conducted experiments on mostly African-American inmates. Prisoners were infected with diseases, exposed to chemical agents, and subjected to painful procedures. Kligman famously said, "All I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing a fertile field for the first time." The Vacaville Prison Experiments. At California Medical Facility in Vacaville, Dr. Arthur Nugent conducted mind control experiments on prisoners. Inmates were given massive doses of psychoactive drugs, subjected to sensory deprivation, and forced into therapy sessions designed to break their personalities. Subject 119, Robert Williams, imprisoned for burglary, was selected for Vacaville's Special Treatment Unit. For 6 months, he received daily injections of experimental psychoactive compounds. Williams later described the experience. "They turned me into a zombie. I couldn't think, couldn't remember my own name sometimes." The children's experiments. Perhaps most horrifically, MK Ultra also targeted children. At several institutions across the country, orphaned and mentally disabled children became test subjects. The Laurel Children's Center in Maryland, Dr. Loretta Bender conducted experiments on children as young as 5 years old. These children were given LSD and subjected to electroshock therapy. The stated goal was to cure autism and schizophrenia, but internal memos revealed the real purpose: testing the limits of psychological manipulation on developing minds. Tommy Henderson was 7 years old when he arrived at Laurel in 1959. His parents had died in a car accident, and he was placed in state care. Dr. Bender selected him for her special program. Tommy was a bright, happy child when he came to us, recalled Nurse Patricia Davis years later. But after Dr. Bender's treatments, he became withdrawn, couldn't speak properly, had terrible nightmares. Tommy received LSD treatments twice weekly for 8 months. Combined with electroshock therapy, these experiments essentially erased his personality. He never recovered and died in a state institution in 1978. The program wasn't limited to American soil. CIA stations worldwide conducted similar experiments, often with even less oversight. Operation Chaos. London. At the American Embassy in London, CIA operatives drugged British intelligence officers during joint operations. The goal was to test whether LSD could extract secrets during informal conversations. Michael Thornton, an MI6 officer, was drugged during a 1965 dinner with CIA counterparts. "I thought I was going mad," he later recalled. "Colors were swirling, voices became distorted. I said things I never intended to say." The Guatemala experiments. From 1946 to 1948, American doctors infected Guatemalan prisoners, mental patients, and soldiers with syphilis and gonorrhea without their knowledge, while technically predating MK-Ultra. These experiments established the framework for human experimentation that MK-Ultra would later expand. Canadian collaboration. The CIA funneled money through the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology to Dr. Ewan Cameron at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute. Cameron's psychic driving experiments were even more extreme than American operations. Cameron developed a three-stage process: de-patterning, breaking down the patient's existing personality through massive electroshock and drug-induced comas; psychic driving, playing repetitive messages to unconscious patients for weeks; rebuilding, attempting to construct new personalities from scratch. Patient Mary Collins underwent Cameron's full treatment in 1960. She entered the hospital with mild postpartum depression and emerged 3 months later, unable to recognize her own children. "They stole my life," she said years later. "I became a different person entirely." As MK-Ultra evolved, it spawned dozens of related programs, each exploring different aspects of human manipulation, focused specifically on creating programmed individuals through severe trauma and psychological conditioning. Subjects, often children from broken homes, were subjected to extreme abuse designed to create multiple personality disorders that could be controlled. Attempted to create sleeper agents, individuals who would live normal lives but could be activated with specific triggers to carry out missions. Explored the use of hypnosis, drugs, and psychological pressure to force subjects to commit acts against their will, including murder. Dr. George Estabrooks, a Harvard psychologist working on Artichoke, claimed in 1971, "I can hypnotize a man without his knowledge or consent into committing treason against the United States." The path to MK-Ultra's exposure began with an unrelated event: the Watergate break-in on June 17, 1972. As investigations into the Nixon administration deepened, Congress began scrutinizing all federal agencies. Among the Watergate burglars was James McCord, a former CIA employee. This connection led investigators to ask broader questions about CIA domestic operations, something that was supposed to be forbidden. Senator Frank Church of Idaho, a Mormon with deep ethical convictions, was appalled by what he was learning. "How can we call ourselves a free society if our own government is conducting mind control experiments on its citizens?" he asked during a closed-door Senate briefing. The Church Committee's investigation initially focused on CIA surveillance of American citizens, but as they dug deeper, they discovered financial irregularities that pointed to something much darker. Dorothy Matthews, the accountant who discovered the financial records, later testified, "I saw expenses for special research projects totaling millions of dollars. When I asked my supervisor what these projects were, he told me I didn't have clearance to know." When the remaining MK-Ultra documents were discovered in 1977, several key figures agreed to testify before Congress, revealing the program's true scope. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb's testimony, July 1977. "We were afraid. The Korean War had shown us that our enemies had techniques we didn't understand. American prisoners were coming back programmed. We felt we had no choice but to develop our own capabilities. When Senator Edward Kennedy asked about consent, Gottlieb replied, "The nature of the research precluded informed consent. If subjects knew they were receiving LSD, the experiments would have been useless." Richard Helms' testimony, September 1977. Helms, the former CIA director, was combative and unapologetic. "Gentlemen, we were in a Cold War. The survival of our nation was at stake. We did what we thought was necessary." When asked about destroying documents, Helms said, "It was a perfectly routine thing to do. We destroy documents all the time." George Hunter White's testimony, October 1977. White, who ran Operation Midnight Climax, was unrepentant. "We were at war. We used the same techniques the enemy would use on us. I sleep fine at night." The revelation of MK-Ultra sent shockwaves through the scientific and medical communities. Many researchers who had unknowingly participated in CIA-funded experiments were horrified to learn the truth. Dr. Harris Isbell of Lexington was confronted by colleagues about his role. "I thought I was conducting legitimate research," he claimed. "I didn't know the real purpose was mind control." But internal memos revealed otherwise. In a 1958 letter to the CIA, Isbell wrote, "We have had a lot of fun with the LSD experiments. The subjects have no idea what they're receiving." The American Psychological Association launched an ethics investigation. Dr. Martin Orne, a respected psychologist, testified, "What happened under MK-Ultra violated every principle of medical ethics. These weren't experiments. They were human torture disguised as science." Several universities faced lawsuits and congressional investigations. Harvard President Derek Bok issued a public apology in 1978. "We failed in our duty to protect students and subjects. We allowed our institution to be used for purposes that violated fundamental human rights." Many MK-Ultra subjects suffered lifelong consequences that only became apparent decades later. Delayed onset psychosis. Subjects who seemed to recover initially often developed severe mental illness years later. Dr. Joel Fort, who treated many victims, noted, "We're seeing patients in their 60s and 70s developing symptoms that clearly trace back to LSD experiments from the 1950s. Intergenerational effects. Some studies suggested that trauma from MK-Ultra experiments affected subjects' children and grandchildren. Dr. Rachel Yehuda's research on Holocaust survivors provided a framework for understanding how extreme trauma could alter gene expression. Margaret Thompson's daughter, Sarah, suffered from severe anxiety and depression despite no personal history of trauma. When genetic testing became available, researchers found markers consistent with inherited trauma responses. Chronic physical ailments. Many subjects developed unexplained physical symptoms. Edward Martinez, subjected to experiments at Vacaville prison, suffered from chronic pain, digestive issues, and autoimmune disorders for the rest of his life. "My body never recovered from what they did to me," he said. In the late 1960s, as traditional MK-Ultra research hit dead ends, the CIA launched even stranger programs exploring occult and paranormal methods of mind control. Project Often, 1968 to 1972. Investigated whether supernatural forces could be harnessed for intelligence purposes. The CIA consulted with witches, occultists, and practitioners of black magic. Project Chickwit, 1965 to 1972. Explored claims of psychic phenomena, attempting to develop remote viewing capabilities and psychic espionage methods. Dr. Christopher Green, a CIA scientist involved in Often, later admitted, "We were grasping at straws. Traditional methods weren't working, so we tried everything, including things that seem absurd in hindsight." The CIA hired consulting contracts with various occult practitioners. Sybil Leek, a British witch who claimed she could influence people's thoughts through psychic projection. The CIA paid her $50,000 to attempt psychic attacks on foreign leaders. Andrea Puharich, a physician who claimed to communicate with extraterrestrials and could induce altered states of consciousness through electromagnetic fields. These programs produced no useful results, but consumed millions of dollars and further demonstrated the CIA's willingness to pursue any avenue, no matter how bizarre. Recent document releases and whistleblower testimonies have revealed that mind control research never truly ended. CIA documents released 2017 to 2022. Under pressure from FOIA lawsuits, the CIA has released additional documents showing experiments continued into the 1980s under different code names. Foreign intelligence services were given access to MK-Ultra research. Some techniques were used in Iraq and Afghanistan interrogations. MK-Ultra in popular culture. The program's exposure influenced decades of conspiracy theories and fictional portrayals. Movies like The Manchurian Candidate and TV shows like Stranger Things drew directly from MK-Ultra revelations. But this cultural impact has been double-edged. Real victims sometimes struggle to be taken seriously because their accounts seem like fiction. Today's mind control research has moved far beyond crude chemical experiments to sophisticated neurotechnology, brain-computer interfaces. Companies like Neuralink are developing direct neural implants that could potentially control thoughts and memories. Transcranial stimulation. Researchers can now alter mood, memory, and decision-making using magnetic and electrical brain stimulation. Pharmacological advances. New drugs can selectively target specific neurotransmitter systems, potentially allowing precise control over emotions and cognition. Dr. Raphael Yuste of Columbia University warns, "We're entering an era where the technology exists to directly manipulate human consciousness. We need strong ethical guidelines before it's too late." Legal scholars have argued that MK-Ultra violated international law established at the Nuremberg trials after World War II. The Nuremberg Code established that voluntary consent is absolutely essential for human experimentation. Experiments should benefit society and be based on prior animal research. Unnecessary suffering must be avoided. Subjects must be free to end participation at any time. MK-Ultra violated every single principle. Dr. Leo Alexander, who helped write the Nuremberg Code, said in 1976, what the CIA did was identical in principle to what the Nazis did. The only difference was scale. Several legal experts have called for war crimes prosecutions, but the statute of limitations has passed for most offenses. In the 1980s and 1990s, as more documents were released, MK-Ultra survivors began speaking publicly. Claudia Mullen's testimony, 1995. Mullen testified before Congress about being subjected to experiments as a child. "They told me I was helping my country. I was 7 years old. They drugged me, sexually abused me, and programmed me to forget. It took decades to remember what they did." Carol Rutz's account. Rutz wrote about being part of Project Monarch. "They created multiple personalities in me through trauma. Each personality could be controlled with specific triggers. I was programmed to be a sex slave and information courier." Valerie Wolf's investigation. As a therapist treating trauma victims, Wolf identified a pattern of ritual abuse and mind control programming among her clients. Her research led to congressional hearings in 1995. However, some survivor accounts include claims that are difficult to verify, leading to debates about false memory syndrome and the reliability of recovered memories. The MK-Ultra revelations led to significant reforms in human experimentation, oversight. The Belmont Report, 1979, established ethical principles for research involving humans, including respect for persons, beneficence, justice, institutional review, boards. All research institutions now must have ethics committees that review and approve human experimentation. Informed consent requirements. Subjects must be fully informed about risks and procedures before participating in research, but critics argue these safeguards are insufficient. Dr. Arthur Kaplan, a bioethicist, notes, "The system depends on honest reporting by researchers. If they want to hide something, they still can." MK-Ultra's exposure fueled theories about a deep state conducting illegal operations without oversight. While many such theories are unfounded, legitimate questions remain. Continued surveillance. Edward Snowden's 2013 revelations showed the NSA conducting mass surveillance operations that Congress didn't know about. Torture programs. After 9/11, the CIA resumed using techniques developed during MK-Ultra at sites like Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib. Unacknowledged special access programs. The Pentagon admits to running classified programs that even most members of Congress don't know about. Former CIA Director John Brennan acknowledged in 2014, "We have learned from past mistakes, but the temptation to push ethical boundaries in the name of national security remains strong." MK-Ultra wasn't unique to America. Similar programs operated worldwide. Soviet program. The KGB's special laboratory developed truth serums and mind control techniques. Defector Oleg Gordievsky revealed experiments using psychoactive drugs on political prisoners. British research. At Porton Down, the UK's chemical weapons facility, researchers tested LSD on military volunteers without full informed consent. Some subjects suffered permanent psychological damage. Chinese programs. During the Cultural Revolution, Chinese authorities used thought reform techniques that combined physical torture with psychological manipulation. Modern concern. Today, countries like China and Russia are investing heavily in neurotechnology research with potential mind control applications. The international nature of this research makes oversight and accountability extremely difficult. Modern technology has created new possibilities for mass mind control. Social media algorithms. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter use sophisticated algorithms to influence users' emotions and opinions. The 2016 Cambridge Analytica scandal revealed how personal data could be weaponized for political manipulation. Deepfake technology. I can now create convincing fake videos of anyone saying anything, potentially undermining the concept of objective truth. Virtual reality. Immersive VR environments could be used to implant false memories or alter perception of reality. Internet of Things. Smart devices collect unprecedented amounts of personal data, potentially enabling behavioral prediction and manipulation on a massive scale. Tech whistleblower Christopher Wiley warned, "What we can do now makes MK-Ultra look primitive. We can influence billions of people simultaneously without them knowing it." As we reflect on the MK-Ultra saga, several crucial lessons emerge. Power requires oversight. No institution, no matter how well-intentioned, should have unlimited power over human beings. Checks and balances aren't just political theory. They're essential safeguards against abuse. Scientific ethics matter. The pursuit of knowledge doesn't justify any means. Researchers have moral obligations that transcend national security concerns. Transparency is essential. Excessive secrecy creates conditions where abuse flourishes. Democratic societies must balance legitimate security needs with public accountability. Victims deserve justice. The MK Ultra survivors never received adequate compensation or recognition. Their suffering reminds us of the human cost of unchecked power. History repeats. Without constant vigilance, the same mistakes will be made again with new technology and new justifications. As of 2024, Eric Olson continues his fight for justice for his father, Frank. Now in his 80s, he has spent more than half his life investigating his father's murder. People ask me why I won't let this go, Eric says, but this isn't just about my father. It's about the principle that no government should be able to kill its own citizens and cover it up. Until there's accountability, it could happen again. His quest has uncovered evidence that Frank Olson wasn't the only CIA employee killed to protect MK Ultra secrets. At least 3 other suspicious deaths of CIA personnel occurred during the program's most sensitive phases. Richard Helms thought that by burning those documents on that cold November day in 1973, he could bury MK Ultra's secrets forever. But truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply buried. The MK Ultra program teaches us that the line between civilization and barbarism is thinner than we like to believe. Under the right circumstances, fear, secrecy, unchecked authority, even democratic societies can commit atrocities. Today, as we face new threats and new technologies, the lessons of MK Ultra are more relevant than ever. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, neurotechnology all offer tremendous benefits, but also unprecedented power to manipulate human consciousness. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb died in 1999, taking many secrets with him. Frank Olson's murder remains officially unsolved. Margaret Thompson died never fully recovering her stolen memories. Harold Thompson's children still wonder what really happened to their father in San Francisco. The documents Richard Helms ordered burned are gone forever, but the truth they contained lives on in the testimonies of survivors, the investigations of journalists, and the memories of those who refuse to forget. Because if history teaches us anything, it's this: truth doesn't burn, it waits, and eventually it emerges. And when it does, it illuminates not just the crimes of the past, but the vigilance required to prevent them in the future. The price of freedom, they say, is eternal vigilance. MK Ultra proves that the price of forgetting is far higher. Final music, Fade. The story of MK Ultra isn't just history. It's a warning. In our age of technological revolution, when artificial intelligence can manipulate behavior and social media can shape reality, we must remember the capacity for good and evil exists in every generation. The only question is which we'll choose and whether we'll have the wisdom to recognize the difference.